So, I mean, you know, sort of a fundamental about humanness is there's this brain thing. It makes us different than the other creatures that we're familiar with based on size and how it functions. So a good place to start is about human brains and a kind of basic principle that is not uncontested. Okay? It's being contested more and more and more, and part of what this concept sort of examines is it's the contestation over where we are with this. There was no evidence, there has never been any evidence up to just recently, okay, that the human brain gets rewired very fast. There has been evolutionary evidence that over time the brain evolves and the wiring changes. Okay? And there is some increasing anecdotal evidence that people, for instance, who have brain injuries, right, or deficits that are new to them for one reason or the other, that their brain does figure out different pathways and sort of rewire itself. So we're not altogether clear about this particular feature. We sort of start from the base, which is, if you look at evolutionary history, there isn't a good sense that the brain rewires itself really fast. In the last 100 years, we've gotten a little different picture of that, both in terms of injury neurology and in terms of maybe some of the stuff we're learning now because we've got different imagery available for which parts of the brain is working and that kind of thing. The general principle is sort of that this stuff has changed so fast. Communication technologies, especially computational communication technologies, have changed so fast that the brain just doesn't have time to rewire itself for it. Now that's not to say we're totally overwhelmed, but that is to say that there are issues. Okay? So as we get a little bit further, and we'll sort of genuflect in the direction of it today, and then a little bit later we'll take it on a little more thoroughly. You know, we've got this great, huge argument about multitasking. And again, it'll come up once today, and then it'll come up again later. But kind of the basic stuff with it is that, you know, you guys are digital natives, so you're different. You can multitask. Dinosaurs can't. Therefore, you know, you can have 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or 7 things going at once. You're able to switch really fast among it all, and it makes you really cool, and we're really slow, and we're really dull. And basically the literature says bull hunky. Okay? Basically the literature says there's no such thing as multitasking. It's switching back and forth really fast among and between things, and what it means is you're not paying attention to anything. You're not focused on anything at all, you're just switching. And it isn't generational, except that you've got more opportunity to do it, so you do it more. And you're not any better at it than we are. As a matter of fact, we're way better at it than you are. Not the switching part, but the paying attention to the important part. So for instance, the accident data in cars says if you get on a cell phone, you're like 20 times more likely to have an accident than I am. Because when you get on a cell phone, you don't pay any attention to what you're doing. When I get on a cell phone, I don't pay any attention to the conversation, I pay attention to the road. That's just what the literature says, if you ask the insurance guys. That's why rates are still sky high. Now, what we don't know, and what we're going to look at a little bit today, is what some of those wiring issues are. Okay, sort of, you know, because see, McLuhan said, and this is something we never, you know, you can't just, because a theorist says this, you can't start opening up humans. Hey, let's look at his brain and see what's happened. You know, but McLuhan said that's the fundamental difference in media, is that the primary media of an age privileges certain senses and actually raises the ratio, changes the ratio between the senses such that we are changed by the primary media of the day. Right? Sight is privileged, sound is privileged, touch is privileged, and in new media, don't misunderstand me there, McLuhan said in new media, or in electricity, touch and sound are privileged. In print, vision was privileged. Right? You didn't hear the story anymore. You had to be in a room where you could have enough light to focus on it, because you had to read it. Okay? In new media, in electric, our senses are vibrated with electricity. So it's tactile. And it's like going back to aural, like going back to sound. Right? So it's tactile and visual. Okay? Now, so he says we get those tuned up. Well, there's no tests for, first of all, you can't go back and test those dead guys to see, what their senses were like. So you can never see that change. Right? But this is his notion was we do get rewired. But then there just really isn't very much evolutionary evidence for it. Okay? So, in some ways we know. So how do we know we're dealing with old brains? You could test it anytime you want. An easy way to do it is to go to a movie. Especially a scary movie. Especially a really scary movie. Especially a really scary movie. The scarier, the better. Or you can just go in your basement and turn off the lights and watch television really closely to something that's you haven't seen before and you don't know what to expect. And, when that happens, what happens to you is the same exact thing that would happen if a real live Bengal tiger jumped out of your closet. It's the same thing. The physiological response is fright and flight. The measurements are almost all the same. The eyes do the same thing. The brain patterns do the same. It's like, and it's a scream. Dummy, you've watched it your whole life. You're real clear it's not real. It's a play. It's flashed on or behind a piece of filament. In fact, you make the damn things. There were cameras, there were lights, there were 150 people on the set. There's a camera behind and a camera on the other side, and then some editor went, and it looks really startling. How come your brain doesn't just go, well, screw this? Instead, you go, oh, wait, never mind. In the meantime, you feed your pants. Why is that? Because you're carrying around the same piece of furniture in here that the cave person did. Gotta run like hell. The saber-toothed tiger gonna eat me. And you can, there's a whole bunch of stuff. You can't. Our brains don't tell the difference very well between awake and asleep. Most of the states that you conscious awareness, forget it. It's the same piece of equipment. Now, has it changed though? Sure, it's changed in some ways, but in other ways, it's just that same primitive thing. I mean, we don't even. I won't spend a lot of time. Boys and girls. You remember those stories? Boys want what girls want. God, how many thousands of years have we been doing it this way? You'd think by this time things would have sort of, gotten into play better. Just read a Time magazine article. 80-year-old guys, 80-year-old men are pretty much the same as they were when they were 16. Still looking for, skirts that do like this. There's just no sense to it, No sense to it. But it's up here. It's built in. It's wired. Can you change it? Yeah, but... So that's the point. Okay, now you expose it to new media. Okay, what happens?